Well, I feel that, I mean, when people ask me, because I like to tell jokes and I like to make, you know, have a little laugh with people, you know, they say to me, in simple terms, can you explain what you do? And I say, yes, I'm a consultant in psycho, neuro, endocrino, immunohematology. And then they go, oh my God. And I said, is that simple enough for you? And then they laugh then because they can see a little smile coming on my face. But in very simple terms, you know, step by step, psycho, it doesn't mean mind to me, it means soul. Okay, so it goes soul, mind, neuro, nervous system, endocrino, they're all really the secretory cells and the secretory organs of the body. Immuno, that's the immune system and the cells in the immune system. And then hematology, to me, that's the blood cells then. So the immune system is to do with really the stem cells, and the hematology is how all these different biochemical substances are secreted in various degrees into the bloodstream. That then impacts upon, this is where Bruce Lipton comes in with his epigenetics.
Yeah.
That impacts through the signals that are sent from the psycho. It impacts specifically to the degree of the signals. It will impact upon secreting various biochemical substances into the blood. They will then impact upon the stem cell membranes, which will either allow or disallow those signals to go through, and impact upon the way DNA expresses itself in the cell. So in a way, as we think, so we become. And I can see that clearly more than anything else. But Shannon, the important thing is, it's not really about our conscious mind. It's what's going on below the level of our conscious mind.
Exactly.
That are determining who we are. So really, we're sort of the manifestation of our unconscious rather than our conscious mind. That's why mindfulness and becoming more and more body aware and listening in more acutely and more subtly to the signals and the subtle signals that the body's sending us, it gives us a conscious opportunity to change the direction of those signals if they're based upon fear. And how do we know we're in fear? Because we feel tense in ourselves. And I'm saying that what we can do is, through breathing first and understanding our body, we can use our physiology to hack psychology to change the way our whole signal processing system works. So it's hacking physiology to change psychology. So it's the complete and opposite way around that most of the world is using. They will say, go and see some sort of cognitive behavioral person, and they will give you a more subtle coping strategy, because when these thoughts come up, change it to this thoughts and the world will become a better place. It doesn't work like that. It didn't work like that for me. I understand now that it's the feeling that changes the thinking, that changes the choices, that changes who you become. Did that make any sense at all?
It was awesome. Awesome. I love it every time when you say that. And I'm so happy to now have it recorded so people can hear, at least in my, you know, group of people who might hear through me. I once was learning about how before we're even born, we start to develop our subconscious. We can think of it almost in terms of a language processing. So it doesn't actually, it's not hooked up the story with the image with the word yet, but it's already communicating and it's with us. So if this starts here, let's say this is my that language processing, I'm not born yet, somewhere along here, eventually our so-called language comes. But this signal has been with us since the beginning, right? Whatever this is. And I feel that it speaks in vibration, oscillation. And when I was looking at that pattern of tensegrity or vector equilibrium, I'm starting to try to reduce those patterns of all the complicated language, let's say, to a common denominator. Everything that's coming at us, whether it's inaudible or audible, whether we can see it or not, is a frequency or a vibration. And it's either causing noise, dissonance, dis-ease, or in some way it's harmonizing us, it's creating this, you know, a symphony of something. There's a Dr. Alfred Tomatis, who he's passed away now, but his protege lives, has a little office near me in Toronto, Paul Madot. And actually, if you've read the book by Doidge, Norman Doidge, The Brain That Changes Itself, he wrote a second one, and in that, there's a whole chapter on Dr. Alfred Tomatis. So he looks at the developing fetus and all of the sound that's, that's coming at it, and the mother's voice through the fluids of the womb, etc. So that's already happening before the child understands language or anything. It's already speaking and learning in vibration, in frequency, in emotional language, right? But he does this research where already when you're in the womb, the sounds from your mother, the frequencies, the information, the signals of her emotions, the sounds, you know, is she playing the piano all the time? What information, as all of the planets are spinning, and anything that spins has a frequency and a vibration, it emanates something. What information is coming at you as far away as the planets, as close as your environment, as super close as your mom, who's either upset or not. So what he does, I'm getting somewhere, don't worry.
No, fine. I love it. I love this. I understand it totally. I love it.
When there's people who have challenges, like say they have, let's say it's me and I was a kid. I would go in and somebody would say, well, you know, she's X, Y, or Z, let's call it ADHD, or let's call it, who knows what, sensory processing sensitivity, or whatever we want to say. I don't like labels, as you know, but I say those just so we can be on the same page. So they will start to introduce, they'll record the mother's voice. If they don't have the mother's voice, they will then use Mozart. But they'll start to play, they'll record that, and then they'll modulate the frequencies as though they're coming through whatever the viscosity would be of the amniotic fluid, let's say. And they'll start to, so say I'd be sitting there as a 6-year-old going in for my treatment, let's say. They've got my mom's voice, they're going like this, and somehow they modulate it, and they start to I listen passively, and they start to tone the muscle of my middle ear. Whoever says that, whoever says the muscle of your middle ear, there is. So they start to exercise it, they start to actively and passively, they start to basically fold in or help me to acknowledge or connect with some of the frequencies that I may have been missing or not in my development. And those frequencies are then, you know, have affected development all the way along, and therefore ultimately the physical body and the way to think, right? But the cool thing is, it's not about the meaning of the words. It's about the actual sound energy underneath it all. And the sound energy, you know, has a frequency, it has a pressure change, and it has a corresponding mechanoreception, right? And that then sends off the signals to everything else. It speaks between, you know, the brain and the different parts of the brain and the heart and all the different signals, the trillions of signals that this part of our mind could never control. It's that genius, you know, intelligence. There's my dog. Isn't she awesome? She's my little assistant. Sometimes she's my assistant. Sometimes she's my nemesis. So I have a question to you, which is, so say we're receiving lots of information. And I tend to reduce everything to, just like you, it sounds like, to information. It's energy informing, right? Expanding, contracting, going into patterns or not, resonating, not repeating, etc. So say I'm receiving a sound. Now, many people just think we hear it, but we also feel it. In our bones, you know, resonate. We have a crystalline body. We have all these different, we're like a beautifully genius, you know, information system.
What came to mind when you were talking is that the sound comes in and it goes through the spiral of the cochlea. you know, with all those sort of little cilia and otoliths and those chalk-like particles. And as it first enters, we're into sort of lower vibrations. As it goes further and further and further and further, the vibration increases, or the receptivity of the vibration increases. And what came to mind is when I did some training with an Aikido master, his phrase was, you know, learning to listen and listening to learn, because learning to listen properly is not really about, this is the difference between listening and hearing, isn't it, really? You know, so it's the interpretation of this. And we mentioned subtleties. We can't get into subtle energetics and vibrations if we're still living on the defensive. So if we hear a pattern, if we hear a sound, it will immediately start and it will go and pattern match with a defensive system. If we then don't know it's a fear-based thing, then we'll go into egocentric contraction, and then we'll jump outwards then and come away from our awareness. I don't know whether this is making sense, but then
Yes.
we're living then on our wits and our basic primary defensive instincts. The more that we can overcome fear, and how do you do that is you feel the feeling that goes with the pattern match of defensiveness, and because that's based upon the past. It mightn't even be a personal thing, it could be an ancestral response to environmental cues that are still pattern matched, that are still sort of encrypted in our DNA as be careful, it could be a spider, are you with me? Or it could be, that sounds like a cricket, one of those poison crickets, I'll have to stop here and defend myself. So when we understand in mindfulness and mindful breathing, we can allow these things to come in, we can feel the feeling, and we can train ourselves to let go and step backwards and develop space so that we can see clearly, is this really a real is it a threat? And then as we grow up in both terms of age and in terms of evolution of our consciousness, we can say nothing to bother about. And then our consciousness expands because the sound that used to be a threat has got another interpretation further down. Does this make sense?
No,
Okay.
100%.
Okay, so the sound wave is then it's transferred then. It becomes, because of the pull on the otolithy thingy, you know, hammer, anvil, stapes and stuff like that, and going up through all those sorts of things. Okay, so then that will be turned into an electrical signal that will then be processed now in the midbrain first, because the midbrain represents really the deeper part of our processing. And if we can allow it and watch it, then it will send a different signal then to our heart. And really, I see the heart as the central processing unit of the body. There's an outside heart, and then there's the deeper heart, which is the master heart. Let me just say this, because I don't really know what I'm saying, but I'll have to look at this recording as well. But there's a first part of our heart, which is a defensive. But as we let go of those defensiveness, we get deeper into our consciousness, and we get closer then to mastery. Okay. And then from being a sort of timid, reactive person, we can start to master these emotions and use them in favor of us going forward then. So whereas the mind was basically a fearful processing device, once we start to learn this and let go and surrender to something bigger than us, our heart opens more, our consciousness expands more, we start to understand what it's all about, and then we can decide whether we want a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. So you mentioned before that this is about communication. Well, I think it's about information and the communication of that information. And
Yes.
I think what we really need is, and this is just me talking, what we really need is, our ego wants to know before time. Okay. And what I mean by that is our ego wants to know what's coming up, because if it doesn't like the feeling that is presented with the thought of what's coming up, it can duck and dive and dodge and weave.
When you said we want to know what's about to happen before it does. So that reminds me of periodicity and music and the anticipation of patterns before they happen. So the periodicity of music, sometimes we need that pattern. We need to recognize that pattern in advance to feel like we know what's coming next, let's say, even if we don't. So that pater, that pattern, that periodicity, as opposed to the, the other less, the formless power, let's say, is just, part of one of our needs as humans, I guess.
It comes down very, very simply to just become aware of your breathing. Just become aware of your breathing. And we'll get on to talk about the vagus nerve and the mum and the sympathetic nerve and the dad sooner, but go on.
So say, I know when I record things, if I do it as a .wav, I know how much enrichment of information is in that sound wave. And I know when I suddenly change it to an MP3, there's a loss. And if I then, and the same thing, anything, if you start to octave it down, dumb it down, do various things, translate, there's something lost. So if I'm going only by my ear and my brain, I'm receiving something, it's going through that beautiful cochlea, the spiral thing and whatever. And then here's the key point, and this would be the weak link to me. It goes from whatever that was, that pressure change, it's suddenly going to something binary to me, I think, like you're saying, right? It's on, off, it's, where did that rest of that information go? And then I say, what about the heart? So if the heart, I've heard, and you can correct me on this, and I'm still, this is all still connected, this information. My information's coming in here. There's something being translated. There's loss in the translation, which in that way that I just said, right? Going from a smooth, let's say analog to digital, let's pretend. But at the same time, somehow, I'm receiving at my heart, which is, as you know, like the 5,000 times more powerful magnetically and 60 times more powerful in terms of electrical activity of the brain. And I've heard, and this is where you'll come in, I've heard it gets information first and like microseconds later, then the brain does. So I'm wondering here, pulling together something I said previously, I'm hearing, that's how we think everything's coming to us, but something's happening to my heart first, and I'm going to presume it's at more of a more primal, closer to that original vibration, which we said was the, that language processing of the subconscious. So does it still speak in that language? And so it's getting the information first, somewhere here. Nanoseconds later, either from here up, is the signal coming from the heart up and in the ear and through the bones? And then in the heart then, what's happening? Is that why the heart is most wise? Because there's no, it's got the real information. It's speaking in the original language that probably came with us through conception before we were, right? And then I'll just leave you with that basket of fruit.
No, this is great, because it links now, when we're talking about it, to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and basically the evolution of the human being. Because what I saw there was the first triangle coming up like that. And from the third dimension, so let's go through personal security. It's all S's with me. Personal security, sex, society. They're basically the 3D version of what it is to be human. Okay, and that represents an outer core of the heart. Okay, so in that there, all the signals that come in then will all be defensive and needs signals. Okay, so then we get to a point where the top of the triangle, it's got nowhere else to go now. And so it keeps hitting its head. I see this as the underneath of a rock bottom. It's not a rock bottom. It's actually the ceiling to the next dimension. But what we do is we keep hitting the ceiling and revolving round back again into 3D. Are you with me on this? Okay.
Oh yeah, and
I've got this Vestica Pisces thing going on as well. So really, that there, if we can stay still long enough, That is the gate, the dimensional opening. That's the gate to the next dimension, to the fourth dimension. But most people are so afraid, and they're still in the herd instinct, that they'll listen to the herd and go backwards and keep revolving rather than sitting still long enough to be brought, just let me do this, to be brought up then into the fourth dimension of consciousness. So there's 4D, and the longer 4D is all about the release of emotion and becoming more aware of the body. This is through the intervention and the moderation and the amelioration and the mollification of the heart now. This is the softening heart. And really, this is where I see it. It's back to Mother Nature. Your go.
Oh, well, first of all, and I'm not going to do it, don't worry, but I wanted to show you one of the images from the beginning, the Walter Russell, where he's got the spiraling up and the spiraling down. Right? And then if we extrapolate, we get the toroid, right? So what I was going to ask you was, and again, this is for some reason picking up things we talked about earlier. When you talk about that still point at the top, and then I also see coming down and coming up, right? So then let's put a toroid around that, and let's be making it do this way here. If I had a magnet and I was going right to the center where positive and negative are no longer what they are, they're just that still point, that's called the Bloch wall. So when you have like north and south, or positive, negative in a magnet, and they finally meet in the middle, it's like a Möbius magical place. And so I was just going to ask you, do you think that still point, that Bloch wall point, that 0 point, like, is that where the vector equilibrium happens? And then if we look at if we think about darling Buckminster Fuller, and we look at any of his cool things that, like, but here's the spiral again. When you go from the vector equilibrium to those other geometries, you have to spiral it in. So he does that jitterbug.
To go back into the micro, you know, because we have micro, meso, meta, macro, everything, as above, so below. It comes down to breathing in the end. Breathe in, breathe out, right? But it's the space between breaths. That's the access to the universe. That's the access to the cosmos. It's that space between breathing. When we're born, our heart has an intrinsic, it's got its intrinsic heart rate. When there's no nervous system connected to it, the heart beats of its own accord. Okay, not a lot of people know this, okay, because they think it's actually electrical activity, but there's an internal pacemaker, and most people's hearts beat between 110 and 120 beats per minute. Got me?
Yeah.
So then we have the yin and the yang come in then. Now the yin is the feminine aspect, and the yang is the masculine aspect. The yin is the brake, and the yang is the accelerator. So here's a question for you, right? If the heart beats between 110 and 120 beats per minute without the intervention of the nervous system, when those two branches of the nervous system are connected to the heart, which is more tonally active?
Tell me.
It's the feminine, because the feminine's the brake. Because normal heart rate at rest is about 70 beats per minute. Okay, so in actual fact, the mother sort of puts the brake on, and it brings the heartbeat down about 40 beats per minute at rest. Shannon, not a lot of people know this. This is physiology at its best now. So in a reaction, when we do a pattern match and we pick up information, whether consciously or unconsciously, the first response is from the feminine, because the masculine is like a lumbering giant, and it takes about 15 seconds for it to act in any way. So it's always the mother that actually is regulating. So the vagus nerve and the polyvagal theory and all these things become so important, because to me, I can see that Mother Nature is really Mother Nurture. So what's that got to do with the heart? Well, the heart then, from a nurturing point of view, will send different signals either through the mechanoreceptors in the carotid arteries, pressure waves, electrical signals, electromagnetic signals. It will send information back to the brain, and then the brain will make the choices based upon the feelings that it's receiving to pick better quality choices. My big thing about all this is it's lovely talking about all this cosmology, cosmometry, Buckminster fullerenes, C60s, whether we're moving from carbon to silicon, crystalline, from all that is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. But what practical good has it got?
Yes.
And it's 0010110. That's a signature of somebody's soul, and somebody else has got one of those digits in a different way, right? And I see to you it's either off or it's on. It's either being expressed or it's being suppressed. That's what it's about. And each individual soul is completely unique. We're not all the same. At the level of the soul, we are completely and utterly unique. We may share some general characteristics, but our vibrations are all slightly different. And if you want to go to string theory, we've got all these entanglements at the moment, and we really need this sacred feminine to come back to be the conductor of the orchestra. There we are. Pick the bones out of that one, old chap.
You know, on my website, I say at some point, you are the conductor. That was unbelievable, by the way. When you go back and you listen to yourself, you're just going to give yourself an award. But I will already have done it. I already sent you.
I'm amazed that I haven't said a swear word yet. That's very unusual for me.
Okay, cutting all this, because I'm aware, I can be so interested in all of this stuff, and I have so much information, it's crazy. Like, I could talk to you 24 hours a day, but then I sometimes just say, oh, come on, like, here and now, how can you help? How can you be better? What can you do? How can you help people, etc. And so the theory goes out the window, and you just go and like hold somebody's hand, or you look in their eyes as they're dying, or you sing something, just comes out, right? I don't know where that comes from. If that's somehow related to the heart and some memory in there, or to do with DNA at the center of all or maybe probably something to do with the mitochondria, I'm betting, or the mitochondrial DNA, I'm thinking, or the junk DNA, I don't know which, something. So if you want to connect to your original signal, like you, so it's like golden thread of love, or whatever you want to say, you would say it's something to do with my breath and my heart and an allowing.
We're always connected to that primal vibration, always. We're obstructed from it because of distractions. The distractions come basically from audio-visual processing, I think, really. And that's basically head dominated, and it's really difficult. So the technique I teach is just called put your hands on your heart and say, I love you, right? And basically it's about using kinesthetic awareness. It's back to feelings. So in the morning when I wake up, I put both hands on my heart, right? I just tap my heart and I just say, morning, what are we up to today? So if you want to call that the divine we, but in order to get to that, you sort of had to get to a point of humility. It's almost like people have to get to the end of their thinking, and where they're banging their heads along the brick wall to say to themselves, I just can't think my way out of that. That's a brilliant, brilliant place to be. if you know that there's something deeper in you that's more intelligent than you are. It's called the universe. Okay. And if you can tap on your heart and you can say, okay, I've gone all around the houses here and I've thought every thought that I can think of. Can you please help me? That, Shannon, saved my life. But it took me years and years and years of egomania to try and find some external answer when the answer was just about 6 inches below my chin, really. And so I do a meditation called Cradling the Sacred Child, it's called, where you put one hand on your heart and one hand on your tummy or your solar plexus, and you snuggle into it and you breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5, stop, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, stop. And you just do that for 10 minutes, 3 times a day. Your head will scream, what the effing hell are you doing? I want you to pay attention to me. What you have to do is you breathe away that connection to the head until it starts to realize, oh, she's just in that quiet time again. And what happens is there's a spin where then the heart takes over. We move from the lower heart to higher heart frequencies, and then everything else follows on from there. That's the simplicity of this. It's put your hand on your heart and start to care and love for yourself at the deepest level. And that's where I feel yoga comes in. That's where I feel the union comes in. That's where I feel that the divine union between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems come in. And that's what we're all looking for at the moment. So I feel that the whole situation that the planet is going through is to turn people from looking outwards on the outlook to go, rather than expect, because that means expectare, meaning outward looking, is to go to inspect. Go in there and find out who the hell you are, or who the heaven you are, right? Find out and just ask. I don't know, because for a human being to say that is difficult. I don't know what to do here. Can you please help me? And then wait. You won't get an answer there. Oh, you might do if you're dead lucky. You might get a really clear answer. Or make the prayer. It's like a prayer. I'm not a religious person, but it's a request to something deeper than you. And then just say, can you show me, because I'm thick, step by step, what actions to take that suit who I really am, not what I've been pretending to be. And Shannon, that's the thing, is we have to go in with the I don't know, rather than going in with I've got half an idea here, because it's the half an idea that will block you from hearing what you need to hear. Did that make sense? But can I just say as well, I've got a graph there that shows somebody breathe. Well, it's actually me. It's my heart rate signal. I'm breathing at 12 breaths per minute, 9 breaths per minute, and 6 breaths per minute. And at 6 breaths per minute, or that, round about 6 breaths per minute, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems coincide with one another. And then the heart power really just grows exponentially. That's what we're looking for, is to sit long enough to allow the masculine and the feminine to get into perfect union, and then the golden child is born. Look, I've become a poet, and
oh, you are awesome.
So I'm on one now, and that's what I really feel is the divine union and access to everythingness. But
Yeah.
soon I will put something on just to show the power of breathing. Now, can I also refer people to the Institute of Heart Math?
Yes.
I talk about magnetoelectrics. He starts to talk about electromagnetic. But I think we get away from electric into the magnetics, and then we get into the more subtle energies then, you know. And I think, like the hearing, the longer that we can just sit in openness, the more the information will come to us, and the more we will start to feel subtle feelings. Just a word of warning to your listeners. As you go deeper, you initially become more sensitive. Okay, this can lead to emotional reactivity. So really, we need to become tolerant of our own intolerance as our sensitivity increases. And over time, it hurts more, but bothers you less. Okay. And that's what to me is it's all about. This is really going through. Here's another little quip, right? It's hanging on the hurt because letting go is easy. The pain is hanging on to old ideas, old habits, old emotions, old reactions. The more that we can let go and jettison the old self for the new self to come in, it becomes easier then. And how do you know you've got hold of it? Because you feel tension in some part of your body. I need to talk about something else. Water, how important water is,
Yes.
and how it moves through the interstitium.
Yes, and it's the fourth form of water. It's a gel, and it
Okay,
holds memory.
it does. Talk to your water, bless it, talk to it, drink it. It's not a placebo effect. It's actually quantum physics in
Oh,
the
Imoto Matsuro.
yeah, was it Matsuro? I thought it was Hashimoto. Oh no, that's Hashimoto's thyroiditis. That's another thing.
That's another
But
story.
it's all about really, it's all about energy. If I was Tesla, I'd probably say, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, focus on energy, frequency, and vibration, because that's where we're going. As I've said to you before, the medicine of the future is coming now through people like us, and I've got no qualms about saying that now. The medicine for the future is coming from the future, because there's people like us who have got the ability to dip in a few years ahead and to bring it back. There's bigger things going on in the world at the moment that we can see, right? But we can probably feel if we spend enough time just sitting long enough and feeling our way through this sort of navigation process.
Yeah,
How does that sound?
it's all information, and some of us just like tuning in to more of it. Bless your heart. I know you don't have much time, but I'm so happy you've spent a whole hour with me. Thank you
No,
so much.
Shannon, I love talking to you because we're on the same wavelength, you know. I do think in the end that it's how we ground this and the physical actions we take that will bring this stuff down to earth, you know, and make
Yes.
the world a better place. I feel like the Pope now. In nomine Patris et Filio et Spiritus Sancti. Okay.
Oh, thank you so much. You're so great.
You're welcome, and keep in touch, and we'll hopefully carry on with this stuff.
Yep, good. Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. Bye. Bye.
Toodaloo, toodaloo.
Toodaloo.